What's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. Today we are back for the Infinite Decks of the Week. This is the first time doing a video on it this season. That was away last weekend, so unfortunately wasn't able to cover week one. But this is a very interesting season to be doing the Infinite Decks of the Week, as between the bug on a reset that resulted in a lot of players staying infinite or only resetting a few ranks below 100, that definitely I think has changed the dynamic of ladder a little bit, at least in the early season. And then Conquest. Now that Conquest is such a big thing, how does that have an impact on the regular ladder experience? So we're going to take a look at all of that. Before we do, if you enjoy this type of content, remember to like and subscribe. It does a ton to help out the channel, keeps the videos coming, and be sure to check out the article if you want to grab any of the deck lists or just have a little bit more information on the logic behind them. Things out here, we have a Mr. Negative Destroy deck coming from Les Zohav. This is a pretty neat one. Cool to see Mr. Negative making a little bit of a return. It's a card haven't seen a lot of in recent months, so it's cool to see someone having success with him again, and particularly the Destroy version, which is another deck that has also kind of struggled to be relevant after the wave changes a while ago, but pretty neat. You can do some pretty gross things with this deck in terms of getting a really big null for free. You could even copy it with Zola, get 2 big nulls, it'll double up the null. It's pretty sweet, so I think it's definitely a neat list. They're also opting to go the Deadpool route, which we've seen more people start to experiment with again, so that's always interesting. Deadpool is a really fun card that has never really been the most competitive card, so it's pretty neat to see someone get there with Deadpool in a negative shell. Next up, we have Tintin TCG getting there with 2 decks, one which is a little bit more standard in the kitty bounce department. But the really interesting one here is Shanna Zoo, featuring Dracula, Destroyer, and Infinite. This is a really neat deck. I've toyed around a bit with a Zabu, Shanna, Khazar Zoo list before, and it's been a lot of fun. I've always thought it's a little bit of an underrated archetype, even though it's pretty soft to Killmonger. But this is pretty interesting because we're getting to run Dracula, who we can get down for a cheaper cost, sometimes with Zabu. And we have some really big stuff in our hand for the Dracula to discard in Destroyer and Infinite. Because of the relatively low cost nature of the deck, it's pretty easy to be able to get a lot of stuff out of our hand so that we can hopefully guarantee Dracula is going to be discarding one of our big threats. Another neat card here is Cosmo. Cosmo is kind of underplayed right now, in my opinion, even though there are a lot of powerful on-reveal effects going around. And Cosmo also helps us out a little bit in terms of being able to sometimes play the Destroyer if we aren't in a situation where we're trying to discard him with Dracula without having to worry about him blowing up our whole board, as that definitely wouldn't be ideal. Armor helps a bit with that as well, and also helps mitigate the potential harm from any Killmongers running around, which these Zoo decks always seem to not appreciate. Next we have Mega Biscuit getting there with post-Nerf Galactus. So this is one that made me kind of happy to see, as I know there are a lot of Galactus enjoyers out there who weren't too happy with the recent patch. Galactus has become a lot harder to play, but we are seeing people still iterate on it and try to make it work after the changes, and this seems like a fairly decent way to go. Still running a lot of the core Galactus cards, but now instead of relying on Death and Null to help close out the game, or even everyone's most hated follow-up, Spider-Man, I think that this is a version more focused around just getting big stuff into play. At the end of the game, we can go a turn 6 Galactus route, which will get us Nimrod and Wolverine. We're running Shuri, not only for the ability to pump up our Nimrod, but it also gives us a chance to pump up our Galactus, as we do have Iron Fist here. So we can do the Iron Fist into Shuri play, set up a free lane for our Galactus, and have him come in at 14 power, which, if the opponent hasn't been fighting for that lane very hard, seems like a pretty good way to win the lane and get your Galactus to go off and win the game. We also have Destroyer in here as it gives us more synergy with our Nimrod or Wolverine, and it's also very good with Shuri. If we ramp out with Electro, we get a curve. We can go Shuri into Destroyer into Taskmaster, end up with 2 30 power things, and that can be pretty hard to deal with if your opponent doesn't have Shang-Chi. Then we're also opting for things like Hobgoblin to hopefully lower the power in a lane so we can get our Galactus off, and Daredevil in case we are going for the early Galactus to know what our opponent is up to and hopefully play around it. Next up, we have Gaming Meeple getting there with their own homebrew version of a Into the Spiderverse deck. So always love seeing decks like this be able to succeed. Usually a lot of the time we don't really see this quite as much until closer to the end of the season, where a lot of people have already gotten Infinite, but maybe due to that bug, we're seeing the kind of creativity and whatnot have more success early on in the season, as a lot of the players playing some of the best decks in the game have already kind of pushed their way to Infinite, so you won't get them queuing below Infinite. But this is a really neat deck. I love seeing theme decks have success, and as we can see here, this is very much a theme deck. We have pretty much all the Spider-Man cards you can fit into a deck, as well as other supporting characters like Vulture and Scorpion. But yeah, this seems like a pretty decent tempo deck. We have some move stuff, so we can move cards around the board to trigger our miles. We have ways to make Vulture big, but we're not going all in on the move package. This kind of has different ways to play the game, so you can go for some move shenanigans. You can try and lock down a lane with Spider-Man. You can fill the opponent's lane with a Doc Ock. Then you could even opt to move the Doc Ock if you want with something like Ghost Spider, or you could use Iron Fist beforehand. Spider-Woman's still a pretty underrated card that I don't think sees quite enough play now that Luke Cage is a bit less common. But big props to Gaming Meeple, because it is always tricky getting there with a home brew, but I think that makes it all the more satisfying, and it is obviously a very fitting homebrew given the theme of this season. Then we have Dartil making it in with Hazmat, Sera Kitty, as well as a Lockjaw High Evolutionary. Wanted to make sure got at least one of these in here, as Lockjaw High Evo seems to be shaping up as one of the best decks in the game, particularly in the Conquest format, which a lot of people have been playing. But it's pretty neat to see Hazmat Sera still finding some success. This was a build people tried out quite some time ago, but it ended up falling by the wayside for other versions of Sera, which seemed to be a bit more consistent. But you're getting a bit more Luke Cage value now versus all of the high Evo stuff. And it can also go a little bit tall with things like Typhoid Mary and Lizard when we don't have to worry about the downsides on those cards. And against other decks that play a lot of cards out, Hazmat can actually represent quite a bit of power, and the deck is still doing the powerful things Sera does, which namely involves Kitty Pryde and Angela shenanigans, as well as countering big cards with things like Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Then we have another Shanna Zoo deck. So 2 Shanna Zoo decks in 1 Infinite Decks of the week. That is not something I expected to see this week. But I'm really happy to see it, and this isn't just using Shanna, but it's also using another recently buffed card in Dazzler. So I think Dazzler is a really neat inclusion here. Zoo has never really had much trouble filling out the lanes, especially when you're running a Shanna version, so we can kind of use the newly buffed Dazzler to the max effect. We can also use Invisible Woman to hide cards behind it, namely something like Shang-Chi, or if we're worried about a potential Enchantress from the opponent, we can hide our Khazars and Blue Marvels. We could even hide Shanna there if we're worried about not wanting our board space showing up till the end of the game. Could help us hide against a Killmonger. We also have Armor, because this deck does rely pretty heavily on its 1-drop, so being able to protect them pretty powerful. And I really like the Electra inclusion here as a way to snipe opponents' 1-drop. Seems pretty good. There are a lot of powerful 1-drops going around, namely things like Nebula and Kitty Pryde, so being able to just zap them with an Electra is a very powerful play that a lot of people probably won't see coming. But yeah, still have a lot of love for the Shanna Zoo, and I'm definitely going to be checking out this version, as it seems like a really fun way to make use of the newly buffed Dazzler. And to round it out, we have something a little bit different to close on. This is actually a deck that had a lot of success in Conquest and was able to snag 5 Infinity tickets. to use later on towards the end of the season. Crediting Den for the deck here. It is a pretty interesting version of Sera. Sera has traditionally had a problem of not being able to deal with Wave well. Wave is a very, very big part of Conquest, arguably bigger in Conquest than it is on the ladder right now. So having a Sera deck that can still do all the powerful things Sera does, but be less soft into Wave makes a lot of sense, and the fish here ended up doing really well with it, securing 5 Infinity tickets, which is quite a feat. I really like the look of this list. We still have all the powerful things Sera normally does. Invisible Woman's a neat inclusion. It also helps with the Wave matchup, as it lets us hide our Kitty Pryde back there if we are worried about them waving us and it being the only thing we can play on the final turn. We can still do powerful Sera things of trying to counter the opponent, or just get out a big hit monkey, pump our bishop, etc. And on top of that, we do have a big thing to play on the final turn if we can only play one card in Dr. Doom. And we're adding Iron Lad for a bit of additional high roll because we have Doom in the deck. It can also get us a Sera early. There are just a lot of good hits for Lad in the deck, so it makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, if you're looking for a Sera deck to try out in Conquest that isn't quite as soft to Wave, this seems like a really good way to go. And there we have it. Those are Infinite Decks of the Week. Again, link in the description to the article if you want to check out the decks, grab the codes, anything like that. And we will be back tonight with some new Day 1 decks for tonight's new card, which is going to be Spider-Ham. So really looking forward to that one. But that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.